The transport shuttle landed with a soft hum on the crystal platform of Nexus Prime Learning Institute. Jake Morrison stepped out and took his first breath of alien air. It smelled like flowers mixed with metal, nothing like the familiar scents of his hometown in Colorado. He grabbed his single duffel bag and looked around at the most amazing school he had ever seen. The buildings rose like twisted glass towers into the purple sky. Students of dozens of different species walked along floating pathways between the structures. Some had wings, others had tentacles, and a few looked like walking crystals that caught the light from 3 different suns overhead. Jake had seen pictures during his preparation for the exchange program, but seeing it in person made his heart race with excitement. A tall, insect-like being approached him with clicking steps. She had 4 arms, compound eyes that sparkled like emeralds, and wore the blue robes that marked her as faculty. "You must be Jake Morrison from Earth," she said in perfect English, though her voice had a musical quality that no human could produce. "I am Professor Zelith, your physiology instructor and cultural liaison." Jake shook one of her hands, noticing how delicate her fingers felt compared to his own. "Nice to meet you, Professor. This place is incredible." Professor Zelith studied him carefully as they walked toward the main building. Jake stood nearly 2 meters tall, which made him tower over most of the students they passed. His broad shoulders and confident stride drew curious stares from every direction. Conversations stopped as they noticed the human among them. "You are larger than our records indicated," Professor Zelith observed, making notes on a floating tablet that followed beside her. "Earth's gravity is quite strong compared to most worlds in our education system." Jake nodded, not really understanding why that mattered. "Yeah, Earth gravity is pretty normal for us. 1G, right?" The professor's compound eyes widened slightly. Most of the species in the galactic community had evolved under 0.6 to 0.8 G conditions. Earth's gravity was considered unusually strong, almost punishing by their standards. She made another note. They entered the dormitory building where Jake would be staying for the next semester. The hallways were wide enough to accommodate species of various sizes and shapes. Some students moved on legs, others floated, and a few rolled along on wheels that seemed to be part of their bodies. Everyone stopped to stare at the human. "Your roommate is Pip, a Glorbeck from the water world of Aquarius," Professor Zelith explained as they reached Jake's room. "He volunteered specifically to room with a human. Very brave of him considering." "Considering what?" Jake asked, but the professor was already opening the door. Inside, a small blue-green creature with large eyes and webbed fingers looked up from what appeared to be a homework assignment. Pip was about half Jake's height and had the build of someone who had never encountered serious gravity in his life. "Hello, Jake Morrison from Earth," Pip said in a voice like bubbling water. "I am very excited to learn about human culture." Jake smiled and set his bag down on his bed. The furniture looked delicate compared to what he was used to, but it seemed sturdy enough. "Great to meet you, Pip. I'm excited to be here." As Jake unpacked his belongings, both Pip and Professor Zelith watched with fascination. His clothes seemed unusually heavy and thick compared to what most species wore. His toiletries included something called sunscreen, which confused them since most species needed artificial light enhancement rather than protection from their stars. "What is this?" Pip asked, picking up a baseball Jake had brought from home. "It's a ball we use for playing games," Jake explained, taking it back. He tossed it casually from one hand to the other, a simple motion that made both aliens step backward, slightly. The ball moved faster than their eyes could easily track, and the sound it made hitting Jake's palm was surprisingly sharp. Professor Zelith made more notes. "Perhaps you could demonstrate your sports for the other students sometime, for educational purposes." "Sure, that sounds fun," Jake agreed, still tossing the ball. Later that evening, after Professor Zelith had left, Jake sat with Pip in their room. The Glorbeck was working on homework that involved complex mathematical equations floating in the air above his desk. Jake was impressed by how easily Pip manipulated the holographic numbers with his webbed fingers. "Can I ask you something?" Pip said suddenly. "Is it true that humans are from a Class 12 Deathworld?" Jake paused in his unpacking. "I guess so. That's what they called Earth in the briefings. Why?" Pip's large eyes grew even larger. "Class 12 is the highest danger rating in the galactic classification system. Most inhabited worlds are Class 3 or 4. Class 12 means your planet actively tries to kill everything living on it." "Really?" Jake thought about this. Earth seemed pretty normal to him. Sure, there were hurricanes, earthquakes, predators, diseases, and extreme weather, but humans dealt with all of that just fine. "I never thought of it that way. Earth just seems like home." "What is the most dangerous animal on your world?" Pip asked. Jake considered this seriously. "Probably bears or sharks. Maybe snakes, depending on the type. Oh, and mosquitoes kill more people than anything else, but they're tiny." Pip made a sound like water going down a drain, which Jake would later learn was how Glorbecks expressed terror. "Your world has multiple apex predators." "Well, yeah, but humans are pretty good at avoiding them. We're apex predators too, I guess." This information seemed to disturb Pip greatly, but he tried to hide it. They talked for a while longer about their respective worlds, with Jake describing mountains he had hiked and rivers he had swum in. Each story seemed to make Pip more nervous, though Jake couldn't understand why. As they prepared for sleep, Jake did some push-ups and sit-ups, his normal evening routine. Pip watched in amazement as Jake easily performed exercises that would require mechanical assistance for most species. The humans' movements were fluid and controlled, showing strength that Pip's people could only achieve with powered exoskeletons. "Tomorrow you have physical education," Pip mentioned as he settled into his sleep pod. "Great," Jake said, genuinely excited. "I love gym class. It'll be fun to see what sports you guys play here." Pip didn't respond, but Jake noticed the Glorbeck's webbed hands were shaking slightly as he sealed his sleeping chamber. Outside their window, the 3 moons of Viridian cast strange shadows across the campus. Jake fell asleep easily, dreaming of tomorrow's adventures. Meanwhile, in faculty offices, across the campus, emergency meetings were being scheduled. The first light of Viridian's 3 suns had barely touched the crystal spires of the academy when the emergency faculty meeting began. Professor Zeleth sat at the holographic conference table alongside 15 other instructors, all looking at the data she had compiled about their human student. "His bone density is 3 times galactic average," she reported, her 4 hands manipulating charts in the air. "His muscle fiber composition shows characteristics we have only seen in species from worlds with gravity above 1.5 g. Yet Earth is classified at exactly 1.2 g. Dr. Himnall, the school's head physician, reviewed the scans with growing concern. Her crystalline body chimed softly as she processed the information. "These readings suggest his skeleton alone could withstand impacts that would shatter most of our students. His cardiovascular system shows adaptations for extreme endurance. Coach Korvash, a bulky rhinoid who had taught physical education for 30 years, studied the human's home planet data. I have worked with heavy world species before, but this is different. Look at these video recordings from Earth's athletic competitions. The holographic display showed footage from Earth's Olympic Games that the Cultural Exchange Committee had provided. The faculty watched in stunned silence as humans threw heavy metal balls incredible distances, vaulted over barriers higher than most species could reach even with assistance, and ran at speeds that seemed impossible for creatures without enhanced mechanical support. "How fast are they running?" asked Professor Nex, the xenobiology expert. Coach Korvash checked his calculations twice. "The fastest human recorded here is moving at nearly 45 kilometers per hour, without any artificial enhancement. Several." Faculty members made sounds of distress. Most galactic species could barely achieve half that speed even with powered assistance. "There is more." Professor Zeleth continued. According to the cultural files, humans regularly engage in activities they call sports for entertainment. They deliberately place themselves in dangerous situations involving high-speed collisions, extreme physical contact, and risk of injury. Dr. Himnall's crystalline structure dimmed with worry. We must cancel his physical education classes immediately. We cannot, Principal Thyler spoke for the first time. The elegant cerebral species leader had been quietly reviewing legal documents. The Galactic Education Treaty requires all exchange students to participate in standard curriculum activities. Excluding him could be seen as discrimination. Coach Corvash stood up, his heavy frame causing the floor to vibrate slightly. Even he, from a high-gravity world, was concerned. Then we must take extreme precautions. I recommend moving his gym class to the reinforced chamber we use for hazardous material demonstrations. What about the other students? Professor Zeleth asked. How do we explain why the human needs special containment? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. None of them had experience with a species quite like this one. Meanwhile, across the campus, word was spreading through the student body faster than light-speed communications. The galactic internet was buzzing with speculation about the humans' capabilities. Forums dedicated to interspecies exchange were filled with wild theories. A group of crystalline students shared a post claiming humans could leap 10 meters vertically. Flutterwing social networks spread rumors that humans could run so fast their movement would create vacuum effects dangerous to smaller species. The most extreme posts suggested that humans could punch through solid metal with their bare hands. Pip had barely slept, spending most of the night researching everything he could find about Earth and its inhabitants. What he discovered made him wish he had never volunteered to room with the human. Earth's oceans contained predators larger than most spacecraft. The planet's weather systems regularly produced winds strong enough to destroy buildings. Humans lived among creatures that could kill them easily, yet somehow thrived. Most disturbing of all, Pip learned that humans were not just survivors on their Deathworld. They were the dominant species. They had conquered every environment on their planet, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. They were persistence hunters, capable of chasing prey for hours until their targets collapsed from exhaustion. Jake woke up refreshed and excited for his first full day at the academy. He noticed Pip's sleeping pod was empty and assumed his roommate was already at breakfast. After his morning routine of exercises that would have required emergency medical intervention for most species, Jake headed to the cafeteria. The dining hall fell silent as he entered. Hundreds of students from dozens of species stopped eating and stared at the human walking casually to the food stations. Jake smiled and waved at a few groups, causing several smaller species to actually hide behind their larger classmates. He approached a table where some crystalline students were sitting. "Mind if I join you?" he asked cheerfully. The response was immediate. All four crystalline beings simultaneously shattered their breakfast containers from what appeared to be stress-induced resonance failure. The sound was like breaking glass, amplified through the dining hall's acoustics. "Sorry about that," Jake said, genuinely concerned. "Are you okay?" His approach to help caused the crystalline students to back away rapidly, their bodies chiming in what he would later learn was their equivalent of screaming in terror. Jake stood there confused, holding his breakfast tray, while cleanup crews rushed to deal with the shattered containers. Other students gave him an increasingly wide berth. Even species he hadn't interacted with seemed nervous about his presence. Professor Zeleth found him sitting alone at a table designed for much larger beings, looking puzzled and a bit sad. "Jake, could you come to my office, please? We need to discuss your physical education class." In her office, she tried to explain the situation diplomatically. "Your species has certain physical advantages that might pose safety concerns during group activities." "I don't understand," Jake said honestly. "I'm not even that athletic compared to other kids back home. I was actually kind of average in sports. This information caused Professor Zelith to make urgent notes. If Jake was considered average by human standards, she could barely imagine what their athletes were capable of. You must promise to be extremely careful during gym class, she emphasized. Your strength could accidentally injure other students. Jake nodded, still not fully grasping why everyone seemed so worried. Back on Earth, gym class was just fun and games. How different could it be here? In the gymnasium, Coach Corvash spent his morning reviewing emergency procedures and insurance policies. He had contacted his insurance company 3 times to confirm coverage for accidental injury caused by Deathworld species during routine physical education. The customer service representatives had needed to create an entirely new category for his claim. Medical equipment was being moved into position around the gymnasium. Dr. Himnall personally oversaw the installation of emergency trauma units and rapid response healing chambers. The school's emergency beacon system was tested twice. As the time for gym class approached, students throughout the school began developing sudden illnesses. The medical bay filled with aliens claiming everything, from scale rot to temporary blindness. Those who couldn't find believable excuses started making what they assumed were their final communications to family members. Word had spread that the human would be attending physical education, and for most species, this felt like being told. They would be exercising alongside a living natural disaster. The gymnasium waited in tense silence, prepared for what many believed would be the most dangerous hour in the school's history. The gymnasium had never been so quiet. 37 students from 12 different species stood as far away as possible from the entrance, clustered together like prey animals sensing a predator nearby. Emergency medical equipment lined the walls, and Dr. Himnall waited in the observation booth with her finger hovering over the emergency lockdown control. Coach Corvash checked his chronometer for the 5th time in 2 minutes. The human should arrive any moment for what he had started, thinking of as the most dangerous gym class in galactic educational history. He had taught physical education to species from heavy worlds before, but never to something from a Class 12 death world. The doors slid open with their usual soft hiss, and Jake Morrison walked in wearing what he considered normal workout clothes. His shorts and t-shirt looked strange to alien eyes. The fabric appeared unusually thick and durable compared to the lightweight exercise gear most species needed. His shoes alone probably weighed more than some students' entire bodies. Every conversation in the gymnasium stopped instantly. Jake looked around at his classmates and smiled, raising his hand in a friendly wave. Several smaller species immediately activated their personal emergency beacons, sending distress signals that would normally summon rescue teams. "Good morning, class," Coach Corvash announced, his voice cracking slightly. "Today, we will begin with a gentle warm-up exercise. Everyone will jog slowly around the track. Very slowly." He emphasized the last part while looking directly at Jake, hoping the human understood the need for extreme caution. The track circled the gymnasium floor, a distance of about 200 meters per lap. Jake nodded and took his position at what he assumed was the starting line. The other students had somehow managed to position themselves on the complete opposite side of the track, as far from the human as physically possible. Some had activated personal shields, others wore protective gear that was normally reserved for hazardous material handling. "Begin the warm-up," Coach Corvash called, and immediately regretted not being more specific about the pace. Jake started jogging at what he considered a comfortable warm-up speed, the same easy pace he used when running around his neighborhood back in Colorado. To him, it felt relaxed and sustainable, perfect for getting his muscles ready for more serious exercise. The effect on his classmates was immediate and catastrophic. Jake's casual jogging pace translated to approximately 25 kilometers per hour in standard galactic measurements. Most of his classmates could barely achieve half that speed even when running for their lives. To them, the human appeared to accelerate from a standing start to superhuman velocity in seconds. A group of flutterwing. Students panicked and took flight, their natural response to ground-based predators. Unfortunately, their terror made them forget about the safety nets installed near the ceiling to prevent exactly this kind of accident. 3 of them crashed into the nets and hung there, tangled and chirping in distress. The crystalline students began resonating at frequencies that indicated extreme stress. 2 of them cracked under the pressure, literally developing fractures in their bodies that would require weeks to heal. Their harmonic distress calls created feedback loops that shattered several pieces of monitoring equipment. Jake completed his first lap in what felt like a leisurely jog, passing the terrified alien students who were still struggling to reach even moderate walking speed. He was breathing easily and felt great, exactly how a warm-up should make someone feel. He noticed some commotion, but assumed his classmates were just having trouble with the track surface or something. On his second lap, panic truly set in. A group of molluscan students withdrew completely into their shells and refused to emerge. The Glorbecks, including his roommate Pip, were making their species equivalent of panic sounds, wet, bubbling noises that indicated they were hyperventilating. Their gill slits. By his third lap, Jake realized something was seriously wrong. He was still jogging comfortably, but medical teams were rushing into the gymnasium. Students were fleeing in all directions, and several appeared to have fainted. He slowed down and started jogging toward the group to see if he could help. His approach triggered a fresh wave of terror. Students pressed themselves against the walls or dove behind exercise equipment that was never designed to provide protection from anything. One group of reptilian students tried to burrow into the gymnasium floor using their natural digging instincts. "Is everyone okay?" Jake called out, still breathing normally despite what the aliens had perceived as an inhuman display of speed and endurance. His heart rate had barely elevated above resting levels. This casual question, delivered by someone who should have been exhausted after such an intense display of athletic ability, caused 3 more students to lose consciousness. The medical teams were overwhelmed trying to treat panic attacks, stress fractures, and various species-specific terror responses. Coach Korvash activated the emergency lockdown, sealing all exits to prevent students from fleeing the building. In their panic, his hand shook as he pressed the alarm button. In 30 years of teaching, he had never seen anything like this. "Jake Morrison," he announced over the gymnasium speakers, his voice amplified to carry over the chaos. "Please stop moving immediately and remain where you are." Jake stopped jogging and stood still, which somehow made things worse. His perfect posture and relaxed breathing after what appeared to be a superhuman athletic performance convinced many students that they were in the presence of something far more dangerous than they had imagined. Dr. Himnall rushed down from the observation booth, scanner in hand. She approached Jake cautiously, as if he might explode at any moment. Her readings showed that his heart rate was actually lower than most species achieved during sleep. His muscle tension indicated complete relaxation. His breathing was so steady and controlled that her equipment initially registered it as mechanical assistance. "How are you feeling?" she asked nervously. "Great," Jake replied honestly. "That was a nice, easy warm-up. I'm ready for the real exercises, now." The word "real" caused several students who had started to recover to immediately relapse into panic states. If what they had just witnessed was merely a warm-up, what would actual exercise look like? "What you just did," Dr. Himnall said carefully. "Most species would consider that an extreme athletic performance requiring medical supervision and recovery time." Jake looked genuinely confused. "But I was barely jogging. I wasn't even breathing." Hard. This observation was unfortunately accurate and terrifying. Every monitoring device in the gymnasium confirmed that the human had just performed what appeared to be a superhuman feat of speed and endurance while showing no physiological stress whatsoever. Principal Thyler arrived with a full emergency response team including structural engineers who needed to verify that the building could withstand whatever the human might do next. Through the observation windows, they could see Jake standing calmly in the center of the gymnasium, surrounded by chaos he had accidentally created simply by doing normal human exercise. "We need to evacuate the other students," Principal Thyler decided. "This situation is beyond our safety protocols." Jake watched in bewilderment as his classmates were carefully escorted out of the gymnasium by medical teams. Several needed to be carried because they were too traumatized to walk. Others required species-specific calming treatments before they could be safely moved. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked Coach Corvash, who was still trembling slightly. The coach looked at this young human who had just accidentally terrorized an entire gymnasium full of students simply by warming up for exercise. Jake appeared genuinely concerned about his classmates and completely unaware of how his normal human capabilities appeared to alien eyes. "No," Coach Corvash said finally. "You did nothing wrong. We just need to make some adjustments to our teaching methods." Through the sealed doors, they could hear emergency meetings being called and safety protocols being rewritten. Jake's gym class had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it would be remembered as the day the Galactic education system learned that their safety measures were completely inadequate for dealing with species from true Deathworlds. Jake sat down on the gymnasium floor to wait for further instructions, still puzzled by all the excitement over what had been a perfectly normal warm-up jog. The reinforced observation deck of the gymnasium had never held so many important people at once. Principal Thyler stood at the center of a group that included the school's entire medical staff, 3 xenobiology experts, 2 structural engineers, and representatives from the Galactic Education Council, who had arrived via emergency transport. Through the armored transparent walls, they watched Jake Morrison sitting cross-legged on the gymnasium floor, apparently meditating or simply waiting, patiently, for someone to tell him what to do next. The human looked completely relaxed, which somehow made the situation more unsettling rather than less. "His cardiovascular readings are impossible," Dr. Himnall reported, holding up her medical scanner. "During what we witnessed as an extreme athletic performance, his heart rate never exceeded what most species maintain during light sleep. His breathing pattern suggests he was actually bored." Professor Nex, the senior xenobiology expert, pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's environmental data. "I have been reviewing the conditions on his homeworld. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush most of our students. The oxygen concentration would be toxic to half our species, and they consider this normal living conditions. The structural engineers had been analyzing the micro-tremors their sensors detected during Jake's brief exercise period. The impact forces from his footsteps during that jogging incident registered on our seismic equipment," one reported. Each step created ground pressure equivalent to a small vehicle landing. Principal Thyler authorized a direct communication link with Earth's educational ministry. The holographic call connected them with Dr. Lisa Chen, Earth's Director of Interspecies Student Exchange, who appeared amused rather than concerned when she heard about the gymnasium incident. "Jake caused a panic by jogging," Dr. Chen asked, trying not to smile. "Let me check his physical fitness records." She consulted her files while the alien educators waited nervously. "Oh, I see the problem. Jake actually scored below average on our standard fitness assessments. He's not even on any of our school sports teams." The silence in the observation deck was profound. Dr. Himnall's crystalline structure actually dimmed as she processed this information. "Below average, by human standards." "That's correct," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Jake is a perfectly normal, moderately active teenager. If you want to see what our actual athletes can do, I can send you footage from our high school track and field championships." "Please do not," Principal Thyler said quickly. "We are already struggling to understand how to safely accommodate normal human capabilities." Dr. Chen pulled up Jake's school records. "His mile run time is about average for his age group. His strength measurements place him in the middle 50% of human males his age. He participates in casual recreational activities like hiking and swimming, but nothing competitive. Professor Zeleth made rapid calculations. If this human represents average capability for his species, then their athletic specimens must be... Best not to think about it, Dr. Chen suggested kindly. Look, Jake is a good kid who just wants to learn and make friends. Maybe you could modify your physical education program to accommodate his natural abilities. After the call ended, the faculty stood in stunned contemplation. They were dealing with a species whose average teenager could accidentally terrorize their entire student body simply by doing normal exercise. Meanwhile, Jake had started doing what he called stretching while waiting for instructions. To the observers, it appeared he was casually contorting his body in ways that would require emergency medical intervention for most species. He bent backward until his hands touched the floor behind him, rotated his shoulders in ways that suggested his joints had no normal limitations, and twisted his spine through angles that made several faculty members feel physically ill. Is he injured? Dr. Himnall asked, watching Jake's apparently impossible flexibility display. No, Professor Nex replied, checking the cultural database. According to Earth records, this is normal human flexibility maintenance. They call it stretching and consider it basic health maintenance. Jake stood up and started doing what looked like controlled falling exercises, dropping to the floor, and pushing himself back up repeatedly. The impact sensors registered each push-up as a minor seismic event. After 50 repetitions without any sign of fatigue, he switched to a different exercise that involved jumping in place. He is just playing, Dr. Himnall observed with amazement. Look at his vital signs. He is not even trying to exercise seriously. The jumping exercise triggered every impact alarm in the building. Security teams initially thought there was a structural emergency until they realized it was just the human doing something he probably considered barely worth mentioning. Professor Zeleth received an urgent message from the dormitory. Jake's roommate Pip had been found hiding in a supply closet, refusing to return to their shared room. When questioned, Pip explained that he had spent the night researching human capabilities and was now convinced his roommate was the most dangerous being he had ever encountered. Pip says the human does these exercises every night before sleep, Professor Zeleth reported. The Glorbeck has been watching what he assumed was some kind of daily combat training ritual. The faculty realized they needed to completely recalibrate their understanding of human behavior. What they had interpreted as signs of aggression or dangerous capability were simply normal daily activities for Jake's species. A new communication request came in from the Galactic Education Council headquarters. The emergency meeting included representatives from 12 major educational institutions, all dealing with similar concerns about accepting human exchange students. We need immediate guidance, the council representative said. We have 17 human applications pending, and after today's incident, most schools are requesting permission to decline them for safety reasons. Principal Thyler looked at Jake, who was now doing what appeared to be a handstand against the wall, supporting his entire body weight on his arms as if gravity meant nothing to him. We cannot discriminate based on species origin. We need to develop new protocols. The council representative seemed relieved that Nexus Prime was willing to continue the program. What do you recommend? Complete redesign of our physical education. Facilities, Principal Thyler replied. Mandatory safety briefings for all students about human capabilities, and probably individual gym classes for human students until we better understand how to integrate them safely. Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication link again. Actually, that might not be necessary. Jake is pretty adaptable. Most humans are good at adjusting their behavior to avoid accidentally hurting others. It's kind of a survival trait when you live on a death world. This comment led to another revelation. Humans had evolved not just to survive on a dangerous planet, but to coexist with each other despite their potentially lethal capabilities. They had natural instincts for controlling their strength and avoiding accidental harm to others. Jake has been careful around us, Professor Zelith realized. When he shook my hand, when he handled objects, when he moved through the dormitory, he was already restraining himself without being asked. The implications were staggering. The human had been consciously holding back his natural capabilities from the moment he arrived, trying not to damage anything or anyone. What they had witnessed in the gymnasium was Jake exercising with what he considered extreme caution. As if to prove this point, Jake looked up at the observation deck and waved cheerfully. His movement was perfectly controlled, exactly strong, enough to be visible but not forceful enough to create air currents that might disturb nearby equipment. "He has been taking care of us," Dr. Himnall said with wonder. "A species from a Class 12 Deathworld has been protecting us from his own capabilities." The emergency meeting transformed into a planning session. Instead of figuring out how to avoid human students, they began designing programs that would allow humans to participate safely in galactic education. It would require unprecedented cooperation between species and completely new approaches to interspecies understanding. Jake continued his patient exercises, unaware that his simple presence was revolutionizing educational policy across the galaxy. He was just a teenager who wanted to finish gym class and get to his next period, which was supposed to be advanced mathematics. He hoped that would go more smoothly than physical education had. 3 days after what the faculty had started calling the Gymnasium incident, Jake Morrison found himself in the most unusual classroom of his life. The reinforced chamber had originally been designed for hazardous material demonstrations, but now it served as his personal physical education facility. The walls could withstand small explosions, and the observation deck allowed his classmates to watch from behind energy barriers that could stop projectiles moving at tremendous speeds. Jake looked up at the viewing area where 37 alien students sat in what he hoped was fascination rather than terror. Dr. Himnall monitored everything from her medical station, while Coach Corvash operated recording equipment that would help develop new safety protocols for human students across the galaxy. Today, Jake will demonstrate typical human recreational activities, Professor Zelith announced to the class. Please remember that what you are about to see represents normal behavior for his species, not extraordinary athletic performance. Jake held up a basketball he had requested from the school's equipment storage. To his classmates, the orange sphere looked impossibly dense and heavy. Several species would have needed mechanical assistance just to lift it. "This is basketball," Jake explained, speaking clearly so the translation systems could keep up. "It's a game we play for fun. You try to throw the ball through a hoop mounted high on a wall." He pointed to the basketball goal that had been installed in the chamber, positioned at what humans considered standard height. To most of his alien classmates, it looked impossibly high, like trying to throw something onto the roof of a building. Jake dribbled the ball casually, a simple bouncing motion that created rhythmic impacts the chamber's sensors registered as significant kinetic events. Each bounce sent vibrations through the reinforced floor that the smaller students could feel in their observation seats. "The trick is to arc the ball just right," Jake said, taking aim at the basket. He shot the ball with what he considered a gentle, controlled motion. The basketball flew through the air faster than many of his classmates could track with their eyes. It struck the reinforced backboard with enough force to trigger the chambers. Impact detection systems then dropped cleanly through the hoop. The sound echoed through the chamber like a small explosion. Several students in the observation deck actually applauded, their fear beginning to transform into amazed appreciation. Jake smiled and retrieved the ball, pleased that his shot had been accurate. "On Earth, children play this game in schools just like this one," he explained. "It helps us develop coordination and teamwork." The implications of this statement rippled through the alien faculty. Human children regularly engaged in activities that would be considered extreme sports by galactic standards. Their play was more physically demanding than most species' professional athletics. "What else do humans do for entertainment?" Pip asked from the observation deck. His voice carried clearly through the communication system. Though he still refused to be in the same room as his roommate without protective barriers. Jake thought for a moment. Well, we swim in oceans and lakes, hike up mountains, ride bicycles, really fast, play games where we run into each other on purpose. He paused, noticing the alarmed expressions on many faces. Oh, and we have this thing called baseball where someone throws a ball really hard and another person tries to hit it with a stick. Coach Corvash made notes about each activity Jake mentioned. Swimming in natural bodies of water with unknown predators, climbing elevated terrain without safety equipment, deliberately engaging in high-speed collisions. Each human recreational activity sounded like a survival challenge to alien minds. Could you demonstrate the baseball activity? Professor Zelith requested. Jake looked around the chamber and realized they didn't have the right equipment. I don't have a bat, but I could show you the throwing part. A tennis ball was provided as a substitute for a baseball, since the real thing might have been too dangerous even for the reinforced chamber. Jake wound up and threw the ball at what he considered moderate speed toward a target painted on the far wall. The ball moved so fast that the chamber's high-speed cameras barely captured its flight path. It struck the target with enough force to activate emergency systems that were designed to respond to weapons fire. The sound was like a gunshot in the enclosed space. That was a pretty gentle throw, Jake said apologetically. I was trying to be careful. The silence from the observation deck was profound. If that was a gentle throw, his classmates could barely imagine what a serious athletic effort would look like. Dr. Himnall's medical scanners showed that Jake's vital signs hadn't changed at all during these demonstrations. His heart rate remained steady, his breathing was normal, and his muscle tension indicated he was completely relaxed. To him, these were casual activities requiring no significant effort. Over the following weeks, Jake's demonstration sessions became the most popular classes in the school's history. Students from other institutions requested permission to observe via holographic links. The footage was distributed to xenobiology departments across the galaxy as educational material about Deathworld species adaptation. More importantly, Jake's patient explanations and friendly demeanor gradually transformed his classmates' fear into genuine curiosity. They began to understand that humans had evolved not just to survive on a dangerous world, but to thrive there through intelligence, cooperation, and careful control of their natural capabilities. The amazing thing, Professor Zelith observed, during a faculty meeting, is how naturally he moderates his behavior around us. He instinctively knows not to move too quickly, or speak too loudly, or touch anything too firmly. Jake had indeed been unconsciously adapting to his environment from his first day. When he walked through the corridors, he moved with deliberate gentleness. When he handled objects, he used just enough force to accomplish his goals without damaging anything. When he spoke, he kept his voice at levels that wouldn't startle his more sensitive classmates. The other students gradually began interacting with him more naturally. They learned that despite his terrifying physical capabilities, Jake was thoughtful, kind, and genuinely interested in learning about their cultures. He never showed off or used his strength carelessly. If anything, he seemed more concerned about accidentally hurting someone than they were about being hurt. Pip eventually moved back into their shared dormitory room, though he still sometimes watched Jake's evening exercise routine with a mixture of fascination and residual terror. Jake modified his workouts to be as quiet and contained as possible, doing push-ups that wouldn't shake the building and stretches that wouldn't alarm his roommate. The school developed new physical education, protocols that became the galactic standard for accommodating Deathworld species. Jake's individual gym classes evolved into a unique program where he demonstrated human activities while other students learned about comparative biology and species adaptation. His favorite part was when his classmates started asking him to teach them modified versions of human games. They couldn't play basketball at anything approaching normal human intensity, but they could learn the basic concepts of teamwork and strategy. They couldn't throw baseballs, but they could practice gentle tossing games that helped them understand human concepts of fun and competition. Jake became something of a celebrity throughout the galactic education system, though he never really understood why everyone thought basic human activities were so impressive. To him, he was just a regular teenager who happened to be studying on an alien world. His final report to Earth's educational ministry was enthusiastic and positive. He had learned incredible things about dozens of alien species, made friends across the galaxy, and gained perspectives on humanity that no Earthbound human could have developed. The best part, he wrote in his report, is that everyone here really wants to understand each other. Sure, we're different in some pretty big ways, but we all want the same basic things. We want to learn, make friends, and build something better, together. The Galactic Education Council officially adopted the Morrison Protocols for integrating Deathworld species into standard educational environments. Jake's experience became required study for all xenobiological educators, and his patient demonstrations were used as training materials across hundreds of worlds. When Jake returned to Earth at the end of his exchange semester, he left behind friends, admirers, and a completely transformed understanding of interspecies education. The shy, average student who had accidentally terrified an entire gymnasium had become an ambassador for human-alien cooperation. His yearbook entry, as predicted, read, "most likely to accidentally break physics," but it was written with affection rather than fear. Below that, his classmates had added, "best human friend in the galaxy." The school's old motto had been, "learning together across the stars." After Jake's visit, it was updated to "learning together despite gravitational differences," and became famous throughout the galactic education system. Jake kept in touch with his alien classmates through interstellar communication networks. Pip eventually visited Earth, though he required a powered exoskeleton and environmental suit to survive. The gravity and atmosphere. The experience gave him new appreciation for just how much Jake had been holding.